of disillusion needed no chaplain to bid him be resigned. Gomez had long resigned himself to everything that could happen in life, and it's this resignation that makes his last words so poignant. I know very well that no leaf on a tree may steer save at the will of the Creator. Since he asks that I die in this place, his holy will be done. Right? In fact, ang ganda nung dialogue yung sa huling gabi nila sa preso before yung execution nila, whereby you'll see a full elucidation on this quote na this is the will of the Lord, and there is an unknown purpose to this that we don't know. Now, I'm not sure Zamora knew that this would spark essentially Asia's first revolution, or that this would actually, this would push Rizal and this generation towards full-blown revolution against Spain. But he had a sense that you have to trust in a greater divine wisdom, right? But this is where it's really emotional. Kasi pagdating ka sa Burgos, it's just his humanity, right? Which is very well portrayed dyan sa pelikula, and I'm not surprised na nalo bilang best actor. Ito but Burgos was angry young man. He was just 35, if I'm mistaken, or 36. So I can directly relate to that. To the last, crying out against injustice. Inosente ako. I'm innocent. He protested. So was Jesus Christ, he was told. So, interestingly, so accurate ito. Makikita niyo sa movie na yung isang pare lalapit sa kanya, sabi niya, even Jesus Christ was innocent. And only then did he cease his resistance. Essentially, at that moment, he accepted that he's going to be a martyr. Right? Something that he did not anticipate. He did not anticipate. In fact, one of the tragic things is that you can see until the last moment, parang umaasa parati si Jose Burgos in the sanity of the system. And siguro, kung inisip niya, well, part Espanyol din naman ako, part of the clerical infrastructure, etc. Like, I know the law. No, this is too crazy. Like, so, this is where suddenly there's an acceptance that after all, kaya nga sila naging secular, di ba? Kaya nga sila, that's why, they became the preachers of the message of the Lord, right? In addition to becoming professors and theologians and experts, is because in one way or another, this is about being inspired by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So when the executioner knelt before him to beg for, makikita mo rin na, actually I forgot this part bago ma-execute actually si Jose Burgos, yung mag-execute sa kanya ay nagpa-blessing sa kanya, right? At knelt for forgiveness. I mean, like, this is next level, right? You can see how ridiculous the situation is. Even the guys who are in charge of conducting this horrible act, they themselves know this is not only wrong, this is an abomination. And here, makikita niyo rin sa movie na with the rosary and all, with two hands, kasi nakatayong kamay, i-bless ni Jose Burgos yung mag-execute sa kanya. My son, I forgive you, do your duty. I mean, this is where you can see the passion of the Christ, right? Exactly here. I mean, this is the scene of martyrdom, and I feel Pepe Jokno did a very, very good job of visually communicating to us yung emotion of the moment here. Grabe. And at that moment, the great multitude at the Luneta fell to their knees and in chorus intoned the litany for the dying, which takes longer than a minute, and a garrote needs to break a man's neck. Grabe. So, as Nick Joaquin puts it, the tragedy of Burgos is the modern one of rising expectations. His predecessors in clerical militancy, Gomez and Palaez, could remember a time in the early 1800s when a takeover by the native clergy seemed inevitable, being in the spirit of an era that had brought the liberal revolution even to Spain. So ito yung sinasabi ko na actually during the Napoleonic era and after the French Revolution, etc., many thought that it's just a matter of time before Spain opens up more and allows for native-born, Spanish-blooded, or even not Spanish-blooded people to gain more autonomy, influence, respect, and eventually equalidad, right? Palaez all but reached the throne of the See of Manila, but the way of advancement that had been widening, Burgos was to see blocked. The frustration was so violent because of the impetus of his ambition and the speed of his advance. He was a really brilliant guy. He was the best of his batch. Palaez considering him already surpassing him. That was how good it was. It was a hand-long career from the start. He was still to be ordained when he competed for a parish and won it, though he could not take the possession because he was still not a priest. When he did become a priest, his first parish was right off the Cathedral of Manila. So right off the bat, he made it to the very top. He was at 30 a doctor of theology, a doctor of canon law, and he became a power figure as a synodal examiner of the primate see of the country. So this was a case of a very intelligent, very ambitious, and to a certain degree still a reasonably hopeful person about the system. But what they didn't realize that by 1870s and 80s, Spain was a dying empire, and what was happening there was the violent lashes of a dying beast, and their victim were eventually the three martyrs of Gomburza. And that sets the tone for Rizal to come into the picture. So, ang ganda na makikita mo towards the end, the transition, the martyrs, acceptance, but this is just the beginning of something even greater with Rizal. And the beauty of the movie is that it shows that Rizal is just the next chapter. Hindi to end of the story, hindi rin. So Rizal is neither the beginning of the story nor the end of the story. This is the beauty that we see with this movie, which I think perfectly captures what the nation building project is. And martyrdom is not just this martyrdom happens and it's the end of the story. No, it's about being inspired by sacrifice of martyrs that came before that. It's being inspired by the story of Jesus Christ and continuing this process on and on and on. So again, it's ironic that the person who they put in charge, Pepe Jokno, is someone who says it's not religious and all of that, but there's just so much religious fervor and spiritual depth to this movie that I find it really breathtaking. And to be honest, it took me more than probably 2 days to fully process tong pelikula na ito at i-contextualize natin dito the discussion natin today. Now, let's go to the fourth part, because the fourth part is an interesting part, which I'll explain to you guys now. Now, the first time I heard about this movie was, as I said, nasa Espanya ako, nasa Madrid ako, kasama natin yung kaibigan natin sa Madrid. And it was said that folks in Ateneo or something like that, or some folks with religious affiliations were working on a movie about Gomburza. Now, of course, in my mind, that made perfect sense because, after all, the Gomburzas are priests, right? So perhaps it makes perfect sense for a religiously affiliated institution or some folks in Ateneo to work on a movie like that. But where I realized why this was important for them to do. Now, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna disagree with them or not. I have my views on this, right? And perhaps kailangan natin isulat yan, kailangan natin isulat yan sa libro. I have my views on this, but I at least appreciated, I don't know if I can use the word learning, but at least being exposed to a different perspective on this. Again, katulad ng sinabi ko, kung nagbasa ka ng so if you read yung unang nobela ni Rizal, right? At yung nangyari kay Ibarra, marirealize mo talaga doon na, or at least ito maging realization mo, nang talagang pinaka may kasalanan sa nangyari hindi lang kay Rizal pero doon sa ating bansa and all of the medieval oppression and all was supposedly the friarocracy, right? So, yun ang makikita mo doon sa unang libro ni Rizal. But actually, if you read El Filibusterismo, and in fact, if you watch this movie and all, you'll realize that it was a much more complicated picture, right? That the rottenness dun sa political system natin was much deeper. And in fact, the rottenness goes all the way back to Madre España. It's not in the Philippines alone. That a lot of problems and contradictions and difficulties and oppression we're seeing in the Philippines was a function of the troubles and weaknesses and deficiencies na meron sa España mismo. And what was, of course, happening in Spain was also part of the bigger imperial conflict that was happening in Europe, with the rise of Germany, with the rise of Russia, with the rise of United States, not to mention also Japan later on. So, ibang usapan na yan, no? So, what I found interesting, and some would say controversial, some would say questionable, But ako naman, I'm keeping an open mind here, and I'm willing to listen naman to different points of view, because that's honestly, that's the only way you're gonna learn. Um, One of the things I like, there was a book conversation I was listening between Professor Jeffrey Sachs and Rashid Khalidi of Columbia University recently, and there was a part where Jeffrey Sachs said something like, "When you get older and you read great books, it's more about unlearning history than learning history." Meaning realizing that many things that you thought were historical facts or were the only important things that happened in the past are actually that's actually not the case. No, so that's why I'm always open to, hindi siya revisionist in a way that we understand it, to counter narrative or rather alternative narratives, but also basically based on evidence and facts. Now, going back to this, mga kamelda, naging lecture na ito, na pasensya na napahaba ito, but yun nga, ayoko i-rush yan, because this is my way of paying respect to Pepe. I think Pepe Jokna has done something fantastic here. So doing a 1 hour almost lecture on this is my way of paying respect, right? To Pepe Jokno's fantastic work, and it's my way of also paying respect to our heroes, right? And I really appreciate it, because matagal kong gustong pag-usapan si Jose Borgos. Hindi lang dahil Ilocano siya, vegan siya, yung mami niya ay Cordillera ni Ilocano. No, not only because of that. Obviously, I'm proud of that too, but and the fact that, I'm sure, I mean, these people are all my age, more or less, right? Nakaka-relate tayo in a certain way, but it's also because I feel sobrang limitado yung ating kasaysayan kung ang debate lang Bonifacio versus Rizal. It's like, what? I mean, it doesn't even, it's like, okay, parang sa football, ang pinakamagaling ngayon ay, let's say, Argentina and France, let's say, whatever, right? And ang pagdebatehan natin ang pinakamagaling na bansa, I don't know, Portugal or Spain, parang ganun, diba? It doesn't make sense, right? Of course, magaling ang Portugal and Spain, but may mga nauna pa or something. You know what I'm saying, right? Or saying, let's just debate Messi versus Ronaldo, and then forgetting about Pele, forgetting about Franz Beckenbauer, forgetting about Ronaldo of Brazil, you know what I'm saying? I have a problem with that, right? So I'm all for Cristiano Ronaldo versus Messi debate, but I'll not forget about the earlier debates, right? I want to talk about Pele, I want to talk about, I don't know, other legends in football. So parang ganun din yan. Hindi mo pwede sabihin ng LeBron James and Kobe Bryant lang, and then kalimutan mo si Michael Jordan, right? So in a way, for me, parang Michael Jordan itong pinag-usapan natin, naunang pa siya eh. Diba? Siya yung first GOAT. Diba? Right? Siya yung first GOAT. Okay. Yes, sorry about that. Okay, yes. They upload ko naman itong final version. Okay, ganun. Now, let's go to this part. So, one of the arguments you hear dito lagay ka na natin dito para hindi kayo mag-drama. One of the arguments you hear dito sa pelikulang yan, it comes only towards the end. Again, sorry for spoiler alert. Sorry for spoiler alert. One of the questions that comes up here towards the end is this. So, katulad ng sinabi ko, 2 Spanish governor generals are covered dito sa Cavite Mutiny, because of course this is based on history. First, it shows the limits of so-called liberals, which I think is perfectly sensible, given what we're also seeing nowadays. Na wag kayo umasa sa mga liberal, okay? So, agree ako dyan, right? But, the more brutal ones are always around the corner, right? So, this is Rafael Izquierdo y Gutierrez. So, if you look at Izquierdo, what the movie is showing that is that actually yung decision na i-execute etong mga padre na yan, it fundamentally came from the Spanish imperial machine via Rafael Izquierdo. This was not necessarily the conspiracy of the other friars who were competing with effectively Jose Borgos, essentially. First Pedro Palaez and then Jose Borgos. Right? Yun ang kakompetensya niya, kasi napakatalino ito si Jose Borgos at saka Pedro Palaez, na they could rebut them, they could petition to Madrid. So you could see that in the movie, parating nagpe-petition sa Madrid, parating ginagamit nila yung mga argumento nila to push back against any bullying coming from the other side. But what you see in this movie, this is this interesting contention whereby they say, actually, etong martyrdom ng tatlo na yan ay less function of intrigue of friars, which is the normal argument you see from a Rizalian point of view. Let's just put it that way. But more a reflection of the brutality of the Spanish imperial machine, embodied by Rafael Izquierdo. So if you look at Rafael Izquierdo, um, even the actor that they got, mukhang brutus talaga. Sobrang mukhang brutal. And there are many scenes there na nakikita mo na parang this guy was really coming to the Philippines to crush any hope of being treated, meaning us Filipino being treated anything more than just subjects of Spain, right? That the idea of equalidad, even for half Spanish or fully Spanish borns in the Philippines, like Creoles, forget about it. It's not gonna happen. So in the case of De La Torre, it was like a rude awakening of limits of liberalismo in imperial Spanish machine in the late 19th century. In the case of Izquierdo, it was just brutal, tatay style, like ubusin, right? Yung ubusin, yung ganyan style, diba? So, very dictatorial yung approach ni Izquierdo, right? Which you see there. And this was a secular imperial machinery issue. This was not a friar conspiracy issue. Now, of course, historians may disagree with that and say maybe it's, I'll just say maybe it's a combination of two. But I do agree na by just looking at the friar aspect, which is the Rizal perspective, you're also missing the brutality of the Spanish machine towards the late 19th century aspect. In fact, there's another Primavero. There are other even more brutal governor generals that will come later on. And I can also talk about the case of Cuba, whereby grabe yung mga ginawa. I mean, concentration camp strategy ang ginamit ng Spain sa Cuba, right? And a lot of these brutal strategies will later on be used even in a worse way in Europe, right? So that's one thing now I found interesting. I'm not saying I completely agree with it, but I see the point. I see the point. The other thing is also, I didn't know that. And I didn't know that. And I don't think ilalagay yan sa pelikula kung walang basihan ito. Alright, walang basihan ito. But I didn't know this. Alright. The fact na pinayagan yung tatlong pare to still, you know, be in their full, you know, priesthood garment, that had to be negotiated. Kasi yun nga inisip ko di ba? In a religious Catholic country like the Philippines, kung ikaw ay imperial machine and you wanna go again, you wanna nip any revolutionary ideas in the bud, parang naghahanap ka ng problema kung ang gagawin mo is mag-execute ka ng tatlong pare. And in this case, actually, at least yung isa sa mga pare na yan ay mukhang Espanyol, di ba? So, what are you trying to send, you know, how on earth is that gonna make the situation better? In fact, there's a part there when in the movie, again, sorry, spoiler alert, where Izquierdo says something like, okay, let's be brutally realistic about the situation, all right? There are only like 300 Espanol for 8,842, let's say, the locals in that area wherever, you know, the execution will happen and all. So that's why you have to be completely, parang argument niya, dapat maging completely brutal sila para makakaroon ng essentially deterrence argument, right? But nevertheless, interesting is a movie, the representative of the church, the bishop there, says essentially like, these people lived as priests and they will die as priests. So for a moment, suddenly the clergy was able to overcome the power of the state. And dun also nakikita mo sa movie na the clerical establishment in the Philippines was very diverse. It was a spectrum, right? There were people in the clerical establishment who were actually very, very receptive dun sa calls for equality, nila Pedro Palaez and Jose Burgos, and then there were other friars coming from Spain who had different ideas about it. So actually it provides a much more nuanced understanding of the clerical establishment in the Philippines. That the clerical establishment was not monolithic. I appreciate that. The rest, I don't know, siguro kausapin natin yung mga ibang historiador about this. Siguro si Xiao Chua, kasi na-meet natin si Xiao Chua nung isang araw. Okay, now let's go to the last part. Napahaba tayo. Let's go to the last part of this. And this is the timing is very interesting, and I think good friends like Lelo Claudio among other historians have also touched on this issue, and that's the issue of the timing is very interesting, right? So 1872 is where this mutiny happens, right, and this martyrdom happens, And then 1972, almost exactly 100 years later, you have the declaration of martial law. Now, you don't know kung tiniming yan. You don't know if there's a numerology, symbology behind it. But it's just interesting to try to understand that 100 years of upheaval in the Philippines from 1872 to 1972. And siguro for for a historian or anyone who wants to write about the Philippines, it will be a very interesting episode to analyze. What went wrong? What went really, really wrong? What are the things that went right? What are the hopeful things? And what are the lessons we can learn for the 21st century, right? From the next 100 years. So from 1972 to 2072, ano naman ang mangyayari sa Pilipinas? Ano mga gagawin natin? So, yun ang mga inisip ko na mga interesting na stuff, no? Na I think this movie raises questions. And again, I was told that there could be a sequel to this movie, and the sequel will focus on 1972. But I'd rather leave that for a discussion with some of our historian friends. Hopefully, in our next meta with yung nexus natin with Leloy and with our other historian friends, maybe we can talk about this more. But I just felt there were a lot of things in this movie that sadly feel familiar, eerily familiar. Yung brutality of Guardia Civil. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? A dictator who's so focused on deterrence and sending a message, right? Conspiracy and rivalry and pettiness and brutality of our trapos, right? Elitism is a big issue that you see in that movie. A kind of a de facto caste system that the Philippines had back in the day. Fanaticism. There are many elements that you see there in that movie that seems that they don't seem to be from a century ago. They seem to be like 50 years ago or 30 years ago, or even eerily even relatable in our era, right? So that's why I felt this movie is not just a historical movie. It's a movie that speaks to us and our dilemmas and challenges and pains and sufferings, but most importantly, our aspirations as a nation. So I really recommend you guys to watch this movie. It's a fantastic movie while still there in the movie houses, kasi bakit might take some time before mapunta yan sa Netflix. The money that you put there in the cinema is our way of saying yes, not only to this movie, but yes to other projects by Pepe Jokno and fantastic people who have been working on these kinds of movies. And it is also saying yes to all of historians and people who care about the Philippines and people who want to have this kind of discussions that we had today. On that note, thank you very much sa ating mga kameta. Maraming salamat. Pasensya na kung medyo may mga logistical issues and problems tayo. Actually, I just thought to start with this a little bit earlier in the day. Sabi ko baka medyo malungkot pag sa gabi tayo magpugsa. Kasi medyo heavy yan, emotionally heavy yan. So I tried to do it before the sunset. The next thing I know, ang dami palang hindi na charge and all. So anyway, I'm glad that we got to get some of the things going. I'm glad that we started some sort of a book talk-ish kind of vlog. So maybe I'll do more of these things. There are also lines from El Filibusterismo. In fact, my favorite page in El Filibusterismo is page 334, and medyo creepy. Pag check ko kanina, ito yung page na may extra. Parang may extra yung page na yan. And I don't know why. Like isang page lang may extra, and then yun pa yung exactly page na I always quote. Right? I don't know. It's just weird. Because I have different copies. I also do Kindle, etc. But maybe we can have that in different context and different conversation. But I hope we can have more of this. So if you guys show support for what things we're doing like this, the more maangganyo kami to do something like this. Otherwise, dun na lang kami sa classroom, sa academic setup. But ang gusto kong simulan is more of this, but on social media. No? So that you don't have to be my student or in the university context to get this kinds of conversation. All right, thank you very much. God bless and talk to you soon. Maraming salamat din guys. Talk to you soon. God bless. Talk to you.